While we may have Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 on the Switch, there's been a gap on all consoles now for years since Skate exited the market, and that is of the simulation variety. While Session it's here to correct the issue, but is it worth your time and cash? Well, that's what I'm here to find out. My name's Alex, this is SwitchCorner, let's get started. First up, for transparency, I'm a fan of Session. I played it at release on the Series X, and this has been a long-awaited Switch release for me. While reviews on other systems they have been middling as well, I think it gets more things right than wrong. That said though, no score is attached today, rather my opinion on this build and whether it's going to be worth it. If you haven't already as well, consider subscribing, it helps the channel a huge amount, and if you could like the video as well, that goes a long way. Session then throws you into a large world with multiple locations representative of famous 90s skater locations. These are all over the place from New York to San Francisco, but thankfully this is the video game world and they are nothing more than a bus ride and the loading screen away. Now these bus stops are easily found throughout each location for quick travel access. If I had to describe Session though, it is a continuation of what Skate did before it, and that means the most rewarding experience here. It requires practice and patience. If anything as well, it's more realistic in what you can do. Controls wise, we do control a leg with each stick and the inputs they are often complex. I played personally with a Pro controller. I'm not sure how manageable, for me at least, this would be with Joy-Con. I did try very briefly in handheld, but the travel distance of the sticks just wasn't forgiving enough. An example of this, a demand the game has holding the stick just halfway down for a manual. Sounds simple, but not so much with Joy-Con in hand, and there's just such a fine line there between fully pushed down and somewhere in between. Stick with the controls though and it will reward you. Inputs become of course more complex, but your own skill, it should improve in tandem. Basically, before you know it, you'll be grinding, manualing, flipping your way to success as a returning skater that is now back on the scene, climbing the ranks. The game's setup really is learn the basics and then face off against a slew of challenges. You do get free access in what order for the most part these challenges are faced, and it's going to be rare that you won't have more than a few options available at any given time. These are typically displayed in the upper left of the screen, but this menu, it can be minimized. I like to have them on show personally, but I do appreciate it obscures a good portion of the screen. You can also then flip through options with the D-pad, so should you get stuck, I'd say just move on to the next challenge and then return at a later time. As you do tackle all of these challenges, then you'll get rewards, a combination of items, but think new skate decks, cash, clothing, and just general, I guess, border setup. Skate shops are a feature of this world, and it is fun getting the freedom to experiment. It has a huge amount of parts on offer as well, which has always impressed. I also like the fact the game features plenty of real-world skaters dropping these challenges in front of you, but these are not of the commercial level of, say, Tony Hawk. Rather, appearances designed to cater to those that follow the sport. Donovan Strain, Ribsman, and Dane Berman as a few examples who, to be honest, I had to research myself. The cast, the customization, the locations, overall, I just found it absolutely charming. It screams passion project. There's no question about that, honestly, and I do think any skateboarding fan, they should be checking it out, but it's not a game without its faults. That's always been the case for Session as well, and while they do continue to update the game, I'm not sure it was actually ready to come out of early access as quickly as it did around a year ago. To be honest as well, I'm not even sure it's quite there yet. First off, you can still see it's a work in progress thanks to the experimental options on the menu. Here we can enable things such as lip tricks, and from what I understand, grab tricks are still not a feature. I know they did experiment with the latter, but I'm not seeing the option here. Tutorials then, they come in the form of challenges, and the game needs a better system to deliver the needed knowledge. Often you're left trying over and over with a very limited image on screen to explain exactly what the game expects of you. It's funny though, it's almost rewarding because of that lack of explanation. I can't deny that fact either, but I'm still not sure it was the best approach. Generally as well, then I do find the world's lifeless as we do skate around it. It is very much an empty world. Tony Hawk always did a good job of representing busy city streets, and they definitely missed that here. And I feel that is a big part of street skating culture, you know, weaving through a crowd before that opportune moments. The overall design as well, then it moves you from city to city very quickly, and I do wish there was simply an option to say these missions, they remain in your current location, so there could then be some sense of intelligence to its approach that would avoid constantly jumping from area to area or a waypoint that it turns out is actually a bus stop. This is all topped off then with some wonky physics as well. It's particularly noticeable with tricks where occasionally you visibly see contact with an in-game object, but the trick doesn't implement as expected, so let's say, a grind. Again, look, I'm a fan of the game. I think the pros outweigh the negatives, but you will notice them. Just coming in, you need to be prepared to be forgiving of the flaws, and also understand initially it will frustrate. It often demands perfection. It's also more realistic than most, even skate, as I said there. You could do some ridiculous tricks. Here we are very much grounded in reality by design. Even slightly clipping a curb, for example, will have you landing on your face. Basically, it's for the hardened out there, those ready to dedicate their time. But with that, let's get to the big issue with this Switch build, and that is the visuals. Sadly, I know they've put work into this build given the delay in the Switch release, but it's a huge world with multiple maps to explore, and even with the absence of pedestrian, foot traffic or even cars, the Switch build it just can't keep up. The game is fully intact, each location represented here, and each objective is in place as well, but one of the big pleasures with Session was simply exploring and pulling off lines freely, and that is where this build disappoints. The game suffers from a resolution drop alongside detail, lighting, and there's some minor frame rate drops as well. For me, the lighting led though to a depth of field which proved challenging here, and then the visual drop, it makes it hide many of the world's features. Think upcoming staircases or gaps in metallic fences that you could normally fly through. Now it's pixelated heavily until the very last moment, which definitely causes problems. You can still explore and jump on foot should you want to, though I will say here it's extremely clunky, but that drop, that hit to the visual fidelity is such a big issue in my opinion. It removes the game's main pleasure for me, which was simply exploring and then pulling off lines. The character animations are still good, however, and the variety there is appreciated. That said though, I just couldn't get past the overall downgrade. I went from playing Session for the simple joy of seeing what I could do to essentially, I guess, hunting down the next objective and focusing on that, because these are typically often small self-contained locations where you drop a checkpoint and you repeat until that execution is flawless. For me though, that's always been the starting point of Session, not the core gameplay, and unfortunately the core gameplay element has been taken away on the Switch now, because exploring, trying to skate at your fastest possible speed, pulling off tricks, it's just become so much more complicated. The audio is solid then. I really enjoy the soundtrack, trying to emulate something that could be comparable to what Tony Hawk did before it, and the world generally, it has a few sound effects, but because they are empty locations, there's only so much they could do. I do wish they had a few more sound effects for crashes though. They have no weight here, and it would have been nice to have seen a little more, I guess, for lack of a better term, oomph to them. Session is a good game with rough edges. That's always been the case in my opinion with the game, and while they continue to improve upon it, that remains the case. They do show dedication to the IP, no question about it, and I'm confident one day this will become a more rich option for genre fans out there. It's one of the few out there as well to truly challenge players, or at least in a simulation experience. Sadly, however, on the Switch, there's still fun to be had here, but the visual drop makes such a huge difference as you explore these larger locations. For that reason, it's the last build I would recommend you pick up. I lost much of what made Session such a pleasure for me because of that visual downgrade, and yeah, that's that freedom to simply explore and experiment. So will you be checking out Session? Let me know in the comments. With that, hit subscribe, join us here for reviews and deals daily, and I'll see you all on the next video. Thanks everyone.